in a sense, I'm just talking about the PR of the whole thing. Like, it's over. And Israel lost the PR war. One of the cases, they go, see, they tried to tell you that this 2-year-old was starving to death, but actually she had prior injuries when an Israeli shell cracked her skull open.
So Dave Smith declared that the Israel debate is over, and he makes several references to why that's occurred, how the pro-Israel Zionists are handling this, and why some people pitching the pro-Israel line have backpedaled, and what that means for our politics and culture. So let's get his take on this. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
You know, I said when I was on Rogan's show, and, you know, maybe this was a little above my britches to just make this declaration, but I felt comfortable being the one who did it. But I just said, you know, as far as I'm concerned, this debate is over. Like, I'm not really, I just kind of felt like the last few times I've been on Rogan, I mean, the last one before this was a debate, obviously. And then the few times before that, it was like, I kind of felt like I'm making this case. Like, I'm trying to persuade you, Joe Rogan, and you, the listener, that what Israel's doing is wrong and we should not be, you know, funding it or supporting it in any way. And then this time, I almost just feel like the argument's already over. We're not really debating anymore. I know I don't have to convince Joe of this shit, and I know I don't have to convince anyone listening to this right now. Like, it's just, we're way past the point that there's even a debate. Whatever it means to have a national conversation or to have a debate, the truth is there's just been no issue like this one. It's just been debated. I mean, how many Israel-Palestine debates have there been over the last 2 years? Like,
or just in general?
No, I just mean in general, not forgetting me. Like, just in general, how many Israel-Palestine debates on huge platforms with millions of people, or hundreds of thousands of people watch? Like, countless, right? No, I've been in 25 of them or something like that, but that's just me. There's been a whole lot that don't involve me at all. And it's like, after this entire, like, the debate's just been had as much as it could possibly be have been had, and on as big shows as there are, on the biggest shows that there are, and the overwhelming reaction. I mean, right now, I don't know, by any metric, look at the polling on it.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem like in many ways the debate is over, and that's not just because the standpoint of Israel first being America last isn't very obvious to most Americans, but it's actually how Zionists have handled this. They are feeling desperation now, letting this issue slip away from them as younger demographics become more and more opposed to U.S. support for Israel, unconditional support. And you can see, you know, some of the most pro-Israel zealots like Ben Shapiro and Konstantin Kisin and some others kind of pivot to other issues. You know, they do sometimes talk about these issues in relation to foreign policy, but I've noticed watching them, they're not trying to make these arguments that much anymore because it's just counterintuitive. They're getting blasted in comment sections. People are just destroying them on Twitter, you know, ratioing them all the time. You have this insane piece that came out on the Free Press trying to double down on Israel's atrocities, and it's just not working. And you can see this even as far back as Dave's debate with Douglas Murray, where he didn't tackle Dave's arguments. He just said, you know, you're not an expert. You've never been to the crossings. This credentialism and appeals to authority, when he didn't even tackle any arguments within that first 50 minutes or so. And it took prodding from both Joe and Dave to even get him to discuss the issue of Israel. They're seeing this slip away.
Look at the comments in the comment section on every one of the debates. Literally, every one of them. I don't think you can find anywhere, any nook of the internet where the pro-Israel forces aren't just getting dragged. And, you know, what can you say? Just put 2 and 2 together. You've had the debate. The debate has been had more than any other topic on bigger platforms than any other topic. And look at where the American people are. Dude, everybody. There is like almost no demographic other than boomer Republicans who still support Israel. There's, in fact, now I just saw some polling this morning where support for Palestine is higher than support for Israel. And then when you get into like the younger demographics, it's like starkly higher than support for Israel is. So the war is unpopular. The government itself is unpopular. Our supporting them is enormously unpopular. And at this point, it is like, I don't know what to say, Rob. It does, like, I've said this for a lot of years now, but there was always like, people get real hysterical about like Holocaust denying, or if anybody says anything about that, like even someone like Darryl Cooper, who never said nothing about the actual Holocaust, but just said that maybe it was Churchill's fault, that this thing wasn't just a war in Poland and instead turned into the giant catastrophe it was. And that you see the reaction to that. And I've always kind of had the attitude that, like, I don't know, I just don't get that. Someone denying the Holocaust doesn't get me like, oh my God, I'm so angry. I think it's silly. I think it did happen. And, it was horrible.
Yeah, I mean, I have the same position. It's a lot better to endure someone denying the Holocaust than it is to endure someone killing hundreds of thousands of people, sometimes millions of people. That was the U.S. foreign policy in the war on terror, killing something like 5 to 6 million people. Gaza genociding something like 200,000 people, maybe by this point, by their own admission, at least 62,000. That's Israel's stats. And then you have, over 100,000 people missing, some presumed dead, we can suppose. But Dave's right, and he's right about demographics, too. It is generally older conservative boomers that do still support Israel, essentially the only demographic. I know there's exceptions to it. I know there's going to be some boomer in my comments section saying, I'm a boomer, but I don't support Israel. I get it, but your exception doesn't outweigh the general rule that Dave's speaking to here. I never thought in my lifetime there'd be any poll reflecting more support for Palestine and the Palestinians than Israel, by the way. But this shift away toward the Israel first mind frame is a good thing in my mind.
If you're telling me, like, I don't believe something that happened in the early 40s actually happened, like, I don't know why I'm supposed to be so exercised by that.
Yeah, that doesn't hurt someone else. I mean, that's thought control if you're trying to inhibit that. But when people kill each other, that is something I think that should inspire the flame of indignation within us. I mean, I don't deny the Holocaust. I don't particularly take kindly to people that do. But yeah, it's a lot worse to kill tons of people and inspire and support foreign policies that do that than to deny the Holocaust, for sure.
But watching this in real, it does feel like the people who are still defending Israel at this point you're actually watching it in real time. Like, they're sitting here writing art. Did you see this, Rob? I swear to God, I can't be, you think I'm making this up. Did you see the Free Press, Barry Weiss's publication? Or wonderful,
rag.
Totally neutral on this issue.
Yeah, totally neutral. Just call it a rag, Dave. It's Barry Weiss's rag.
They wrote a piece debunking the starvation in Gaza, and I'm not making this up. One of the cases, they go, see, they tried to tell you that this 2-year-old was starving to death, but actually she had prior injuries when an Israeli shell cracked her skull open. And so, like, yeah, she wasn't eating after that and ultimately starved, but like it was from the and you're just like reading this and you're like, that's it. That's the defense. That's what you're going with. Well, in that case, we ought to support. It's like, it does feel like it's getting to a level. Literally, what's going on right now is that there's starvation. There's reports of starvation all throughout Gaza. And then the pro-Israel people debunking it are going, yeah, it's only the people who are already sick.
Yeah, let that sink in. Let that vile and desperate attempt to pivot away from Israel's atrocities sink in. That's where their debate is at this point. That's why Dave is saying the debate is over, because it wasn't that that little girl was being starved. No, she was actually bombed, and that disabled her. Yeah, we're supposed to then get behind the pro-Zionist argument that this starvation campaign isn't occurring now because you just killed her instead, and, her death was long and probably painful and lingering. That's where their argument's at. And that's why it's dead, and that's why you don't see a lot of Zionists debating this argument anymore. They're just getting completely dragged. And that Free Press article is a joke. I I invite anyone to read it to see how much of a joke it is. I'm not going to be like, a Zionist zealot that says, no, don't take a look at the arguments of our opponents. I'll tell you, take a look at it because it's a self-defeating article. It's a self-defeating argument.
It's the special needs kids that are starving, Rob. So like, don't get all emotional about this, which is, by the way, what always happens when there's starvation. The most vulnerable are the ones who die first. But anyway, once you just get into this realm, like, you're like, what is that? This does feel like Norman Finkelstein said it to Benny Morris, and which I think this does hold particular weight when like two incredibly Jewy people are talking. But when he just said at one point to him, he goes, "You're nothing but a Holocaust denier." And I do get what he meant by that. Like, it does seem like, you're making the excuse, you're doing the exact same thing where you go, oh no, I know you see pictures of, starving corpses or whatever, but that's not actually evidence of anything. Like, okay.
Yeah, that's where this argument's at. Norman Finkelstein's a total hero, if you ask me. I just did a reaction video to a speech he recently did at a church, and he's just been fantastic about covering this through the decades. He's an expert in this field, and he is Jewish. They've called him an anti-Semite. They've tried to destroy his life and reputation, despite the fact that he's actually shed the truth on what's happening in Gaza and has for many decades. And, it is the people like Norm Finkelstein and Dave Smith and Glenn Greenwald and Aaron Matei and Max Blumenthal and Jeffrey Sachs that show that there are Jewish dissidents who can't stand what Israel is doing, and they're treated the same thing and the same way as anyone else who dares to shed light on the truth. They're called anti-Semites. They try to take them down, cancel them, what have you, to destroy their reputations because of it, regardless of what their lineage or religion is.
All right. Anyway, that's just how it feels to me. Like, it feels, and obviously, I'm not even trying to like lay out my case right now. I've been laying out my case for 2 years, and I've done it in long forums and many public debates. I'm just saying, like, it's almost like, in a sense, I'm just talking about the PR of the whole thing. Like, it's over. And Israel lost the PR war. Rob, you were, and I mean this, dude, I think you were the first person I know who called it, like, immediately after. It might have been October 9th when you were just like, there's no way Israel can do that. Like, as soon as their move was to turn off the electricity and the water for the whole strip, you were like, oh, dude, they're screwed. You can't do this in 4K. You can't do this like with this type of technology. People are going to watch what you're doing. And man, that just turned out to be completely the thing.
It did, and I wouldn't have guessed it either, but I can attest that Robbie did kind of call that. I wouldn't have seen, public support turning away from Israel on the world stage or even a subsection, but it certainly has in so many regards, and it's happening now in America. But you can see the desperation is growing among the Zionists. That's why, Benjamin Netanyahu has done friendly interviews with the Nelk Boys and Trigonometry and PDB the other day. They're trying to sell their narrative, and it's just not sticking. Like Dave says, they're getting dragged in the comment sections, and the American culture is just turning away from this thing. Now, will that translate in the immediacy to change in U.S. foreign policy and the Trump administration and how the deep state looks at these things? No, of course not, because the same lobbies remain in place, the same lobbies remain in power. AIPAC's there, the military-industrial complex is there, the bank lobby is there to finance it all and hit us with inflation to do so. Those same dynamics do remain, but I think it might be temporary. That's my biggest source of hope, is that when the boomers that do still generally support Israel die off, it is going to be displaced in our political system to some extent with people that don't have the same mentality toward Israel, rightfully so, if you ask me. So this is right now, and it's a bipartisan affair, it's the uniparty, an Israel first government, but will it be forever? I don't know. I don't know if it can withstand this PR disaster. Israel's lost the PR war. That's why Dave says the debate is over and the pro-Israel argument is over. I like it when they try to still argue their case now, the most diligent and vociferous pro-Israel supporters now, because they just get destroyed for all the reasons Dave points out. I think that's a good thing, and that's why I think there's some desperation and some attempts to be remarkably quiet about what's happening in Israel by some of them. But what do you think? Let me know down below. Is Dave Smith right? Is this debate effectively over, at least in terms of the culture and the new media? Let me know down below. What do you think the ramifications are on this long term for Israel? I want to hear from you down below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, also subscribe to Dave Smith. Really appreciate his coverage on this over the last 22 months or so. And please consider becoming a YouTube member. If you click the join button below, you can help support my channel, and in return I'll give you all of my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.
This is such a new dynamic that I just think like the potential for good is off the charts. They don't have a propaganda apparatus anymore, like at all. People are waking up in a way to this stuff that's like never happened before.
Right.
And I think that gives us like enormous potential for positive things to happen in the future.
Well, it's easy to be a pessimist and a cynic these days, especially if you listen to some of the subjects that I talk about on the channel, but Dave Smith here on Joe Rogan is saying that America's future will be bright, and he cites some examples getting into some dynamics in the political world and in the culture that I think are worth paying attention to and considering. So let's take a look at this. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
You're not allowed to be pessimistic. You got to be optimistic. And I am. I am.
Well, optimism sees a better world ahead and offers potential solutions and at least a mindset of a potential solution. The problem with pessimism is there's no way out other than complete anarchy and destruction.
That's right. And I think this, I mean, I feel this way particularly, I think when you have kids, this becomes like a more focused, I think that the way I look at it is because I have kids, I don't have an option to be pessimistic. I don't have an option to be black-pilled or just feel bad about it. It's like, no. I got little kids. They're going to inherit this world. I got to do everything I can to, like I may have said this before to you, but like the example I think of is like, if you like, let's say you're in your house with your family and like you've got like, let's say a gun or two in the house. And then you look outside and you see like there's like 10 guys with guns charging the house. And it's just you, and you just have your 1 or 2 guns. There's 10 guys with guns charging the house, and your family is in the house. Like, you don't have a right, as like the man of your house, you don't have a right to sit there and go, oh man, there's 10 of them and only 1 of me. I mean, I just think the future looks bleak. It's like, what? I don't care. I don't know. You know your house better than them, right? What do you got there? You got some gasoline in your shed? Okay, shoot the shed. That blows up a few of them. Get your family into the attic. Get them into the basement. You got to try.
Yeah, I mean, this is a good allegory for the way we look at society in general. I mean, despite all the control and power and all the wars and all the inflation and debt, all the civil liberties violations of our government, it seems like an insurmountable task to subdue their power, to restore individual rights, but it is our responsibility as citizens. I have to respect this comparison, and I largely agree. We don't really have a choice, and that's whether you have children or not. I think, there is cause to avoid the accelerationist attitude that, things being worse is actually a good thing in the long run. I don't necessarily think that, maybe in some terms in regard to things like interest rates or something like that, but not in society in general. I mean, we do want to improve our standing, not only for ourselves, but our posterity.
Still have a fighting shot here, so you don't have the right to just sit there and feel bad about, yeah, the odds are against you, but crazy things have happened. I will say,
You think it's that bad? 10 guys to 1?
No, I'm just saying, even in a scenario,
you know what I'm saying? In your analogy, it's like you're fucked.
Sure, but
That's
even in that, no, I don't know that you're I don't know that you're necessarily fucked. I mean, hey, listen, dude.
Depends if you're John Wick.
Well, yeah, but also there's a big advantage to a house that that other people don't know.
I would assume by the time people with guns come to your house, they have a pretty good understanding
Joe,
of what your house is built like.
Okay, maybe it's not the perfect analogy. I'm not saying it's going to work out well. I'm saying in that moment, you still go out trying, okay?
Yes.
Now, I think we have a way better situation than that. I think that...
Good.
I think
you're
that...
freaking me out.
Well, look, I think that tyranny has always relied on propaganda. And that we are running an experiment for like the first time where they're flying with no net.
they don't have a propaganda apparatus anymore, like at all.
Well, they certainly don't have control over narratives anymore.
Donald Trump can't even control what Tucker Carlson is going to say.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like that, you can't even count on your most influential right-wing voice in America to go, like, there was never anything like this before. There was never, even just in recent times, there was never something George W. Bush could have done where you'd be like, tonight on Fox News, Bill O'Reilly and Sean Hannity are going to tear him apart.
This is exactly right. I think this is a great point. And you saw Tucker tear Trump apart, at least to some extent, on the Epstein story, on Iran, on some other things related to Israel. This is the case. We used to get all of our information filtered down through the powers that be, through Peter Jennings and Ted Koppel and Dan Rather. But now there is this new media landscape, and it's opening people's minds in ways that no other avenue ever has in U.S. history. Dave's right. They lost the propaganda in short of absolute total state totalitarianism. I don't think they get that back, and that is, to me, the biggest cause to be hopeful for and the biggest dynamic shift that we should be excited about.
That it didn't exist.
Right.
There was never anything Obama could have done where Rachel Maddow was going to tear him apart over that.
Right.
Like, we have that for the first time now. People are waking up in a way to this stuff that's like never happened before.
Right.
And I think that gives us like enormous potential for positive things to happen in the future. Now, and the other thing that's happening is that, like, economically speaking, our system is being pushed to a point where eventually they're going to have to call it quits on all of this. Like, we just can't keep going up. Like, I think it was, I forget the exact recent numbers, but it's something like, it's over $1.2 trillion a year just on interest.
Yeah, just get that. The interest payments on the debt are more than $1 trillion, and that's more than the Pentagon budget right now. Which, by the way, Trump and Hegseth boasted about having the biggest Pentagon budget in the world. After talking about Doge cuts and cuts to government, those are never to be seen near the Department of Defense, that's for sure. But the interest payments on our debt, this is just unsustainable. I mean, there's no way to ignore this. He's right.
On the debt. Interest on the debt is like overtaking the entire budget. And at a certain point there, someone's going to have to call it quits. And be like, we just got to start reining this thing back in. If they lose all of their popular support and all of their economic ability to keep running up the debt and keep the printing machines going, then I think there's going to have to be a huge adjustment made there. And I do think, like...
Well, this was Elon's argument.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, which is why he wanted this massive economic reform. And this is why he wanted to do an audit on everything. And you saw how that worked out.
Well, okay.
Yeah, we saw that produce a schism between him and the president, a bitter schism with each other lashing out at each other, and this caused schisms between people that are truly principled, like Thomas Massie and Donald Trump, too. Let's just be real, they just used the Doge campaign to make cuts to government as an electoral vehicle. It wasn't actually a principled stand for smaller, less intrusive, and less costly government. That never has been the case for Republicans. They're progressives driving the speed limit, as Michael Malice says. They're not going to chip away at the welfare state. They're not going to chip away at the warfare state. We're not getting any of those cuts because that's what Republicans do. They're going to say that they made little chisels to the budget here and there while still raising the budget and raising these stupid bills, extending Biden-era CRs, and passing the big abominable bill.
Okay, but he was right. Yeah, but that was still also like the first attempt at that.
Yes.
And he was right about that stuff. So, okay, yes, that didn't work. Doge was a failure in terms of actually getting cuts done right now. But it was a huge success in terms of like putting a spotlight on this issue and putting it into the national consciousness in a way that it's never been before.
Yes.
And so now it's like, okay, well, what will the second attempt? What will the third attempt look like?
I hope they're better than this attempt. I give that idea quasi-credence. It is true that it injected these beliefs more than maybe they ever have before. With Elon tweeting about, Thomas Sowell and Milton Friedman videos talking about Ludwig von Mises and Ron Paul's economic ideas. To some extent, that's awesome to me. But if they're never going to be put into fruition and half of Trump's fan base doubles down on the spending, makes excuses for it, including some of the top influencers on his side, it's all for naught. They're still using propaganda to get away from it in the same way that the liberals do that.
And how... we have a new world now where Donald Trump won the presidency in no small part by coming on this show, by going on Andrew Schultz's show and Theo Vaughn's show, and like all these different, and now we're coming up on the next presidential election. Like, for the foreseeable future, in order to win the presidency, they kind of know they gotta come here and to all of our shows and present something that might get you and your audience like, okay, he's coming with something here. This is such a new dynamic that I just think like the potential for good is off the charts. And so, like, yeah, in the short term, things are still the same. Government policy is still what it is, and the people don't really have much control over that. But I think, like, long term, I'm very bullish on the ability of people to really wake up and understand what's going on here.
Yeah, I largely agree with Dave. I actually think the shift in the media landscape is the biggest white pill or source of hope we could possibly have. It's the biggest cultural advantage that we have in this generation. Never before has a generation had this ability to strike out on our own, follow our own independent journalists if we want, eschew the mainstream legacy media if we want, which a lot of older people are not doing, but a lot of younger people are. And the older people will eventually be displaced by the younger people that are. The only counter-argument I think is worthy of consideration here, even against my own argument to steelman the oppositional case, the more cynical case, is that, well, the internet isn't brand new. The internet started, to get more and more popular in the late 80s, early 90s among the people, where internet access rates have now skyrocketed, that almost everyone has access to the internet. If you have a cell phone, you have access to the internet. And even then, we've still seen the same kind of propaganda play out and be effective at supporting the wars and the welfare state and the extortion apparatus, the IRS, the central banks, diminishing the value of our currency, the surveillance state. So even the access that the internet brought to, put basically the accrued wealth of information in the entire history of humanity at the average American's fingertips, that hasn't changed our political situation. It's only gotten worse since then. So what makes you think that the new media landscape will do that? Well, I think there's some credence to that argument too, but the new media landscape's putting it in Americans' faces in ways that they consume much more so than just reading, internet articles generally. That Dave's right. Future presidential debates will probably take place on major podcasts, and it's only because Kamala Harris was such an unpopular and irredeemable figure to many, I think, that Trump got elected. But there's something to say about his electoral mandate. He essentially won every swing state. There was nothing that Kamala Harris was giving in terms of, something of hope for the dissident mindset. And, the Democrats' inability to confront this Israel issue, despite their base being overwhelmingly opposed to what Israel's doing in Gaza, is just unforgivable if you're a Democrat or inclined to vote for them, or, a dissident-leaning Democrat. So that's where we are now. I agree with Dave. The media landscape's the biggest source of hope we have. I'm optimistic too, but more so about cultural dynamics. It's about gun ownership rates are through the roof right now. They've only gotten more and more. The more liberals talk about imposing gun control, the more people buy arms. I think there's something like, 400 million arms in the United States now, maybe 450, something like that. The ownership rates are off the charts. They're only getting higher. Homeschool rates are so much higher. I think that's the only silver lining of the COVID regime and the lockdown regime, is that it made a lot of children explore different education options for the first time, including private school and homeschool. I think that's a good dynamic. I think indoctrination by the state in these state-run prison camps, they call it government schools, is a good thing. And I think, there's other things too, like how Bitcoin is undermining the reliance on fiat currency. It's not being used transactionally in a lot of ways today yet. Hopefully it eventually will, but it is locking in a sincere hedge against inflation caused by the central banks. So there's all sorts of other things. Those are just a few examples, but I'm with Dave. I'm an optimist. I'm a techno-optimist. I think AI will change the world for the better, not for the worse. I don't think AI will create, a despotism. I think the government will try to leverage it to its advantage, but it will provide a lot of advantages for people too. There's all sorts of other things, but I want to hear from you. Let me know down below. Are you a pessimist or optimist? What do you have to look forward to? What are the best cultural or political dynamics happening right now? Let me know in the comments down below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, also subscribe to Joe Rogan. Thanks for having this interview with Dave. It was awesome, one of his best interviews ever. And please consider becoming a member of mine on YouTube by clicking the join button below. By doing that, you can help support the channel, and in return for that, I'll give you access to all of my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.